Good afternoon, Roma ISD family and guests. We're about to start this meeting. It is now 5 p.m. and I call this called meeting of the Roma Independent School District Board of Trustees being held this Monday, May the 3rd, 2021 to order. Let the record show that this meeting was duly posted according to the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. The first agenda item is roll call. Board Vice President, Mr. Jaime Escobar.
Present.
Board Secretary, Mrs. Yadira Ibarra.
Here.
Board Member, Mrs. Clarissa B. Alvarez.
Here.
Board Member, Mrs. Mary Lou Cruz.
Here. I'm sorry, but I can't hear Mr. Bettis.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
There are no public comments at this time.
Mrs. Alvarez, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Guzman, you said there were no public comments. Thank you very much, Mr. Guzman. Agenda item number 3, discussion, possible action to rescind board action of March 25, 2021 in regards to the adoption of the District Early Resignation Notice Incentive ESNI program with a specific monetary amount based upon the district's budget and matters related thereto. At this time, is there a motion on the floor?
I make a motion to rescind.
I second.
I make a motion to rescind previous, I guess, agenda item as discussed or as presented there on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Moreno. Seconded by Mrs. Alvarez, is that correct? Okay, it is moved and seconded that the Roma Independent School District Board rescind board action of March 25, 2021 in regards to the adoption of the District Early Resignation Notice Incentive Program with a specific monetary amount based upon the district's budget and matters related thereto. Is there any discussion? At this time, I'm going to give an opportunity to those that are in favor of this motion, specifically Mr. Moreno, who made the motion, to be the first to speak, and then thereafter anybody else who's in favor of it, and then we'll go down the line. I want to remind all trustees that we will hear from everyone that wants to make a comment, but one at a time. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Pettis, for acknowledging that I was the first one to, I guess, make the motion, but I'll acknowledge that I was actually one of the ones that actually requested for this meeting to be held. And the reason being is that I applaud and congratulate all those employees that have been with the district and that want to retire. I applaud them. I think we've had 2 incentives before. I think it's been taken advantage in a good way. Before, for this time around, for whatever reason it is, it was an explosion, which I don't think anybody was expecting. I've got papers here and discussion that we've had. Like I said, I know we agreed that it was the first 40 or the first 30, and anything that would go over that, it would go up to the 500,000. So I'm fine with that. The discussion was there never to go above 500,000. Never did we mention, if I'm not mistaken, $1.2 million. And to me, which is 700,000 more than which was allotted the first time, which is fine, I guess, because I was asked by our attorney when I talked to him that how did we come up with this amount? And honestly, I said, good question, because I don't know how this amount came up. But if this amount came up, which was 500,000, why wasn't $1.2 million discussed at the start? If it was available, why wasn't it discussed at the beginning? It's not that I don't want those people to get their incentive, their retirement, but if I'm not mistaken, I asked during that meeting that if there was money for the people that were going to stay, and I was told that there was not a single cent, and that these 500,000 were even totally kind of maxed out. So now we're at $1.2 million, and we're saying that we're fine with it, and then we're saying that because we're going to get more money. How are we already spending money that we haven't even received? And if money's coming in, it is always earmarked. So that is my question. You know what? I applaud those people that want to retire. But what are we gonna do for the people that are gonna stay? That is my question. I'm asking. I've been asking since the beginning a raise, because the raise that we gave 6 months ago was not enough. So my question now is, we've got the opportunity right now. What are we going to give the people that are going to stay? We're fine with $1.2 million for people to leave, but what are we going to do with people that are going to stay? And I know that there's a caring for Roma or something to that effect, but let's be honest, that's the CARES Act. That's the Easter Act that we all talk about. That is not money coming from the school district. My question is, what are we going to give the school district to our employees that are staying? Because that was an argument 6 months ago. So that is my question, or that is one of my questions.
Would you like to direct that question to one of the central office administrators for any specific answer?
I guess whoever's in charge, whoever's leading the pack right now with the incentive, that's basically, that's what I'd like to know.
Mr. Guzman?
Mr. Alanis, you want to go ahead and step up?
Good afternoon. Last year, we adopted a $6 million deficit in our budget. And at that time, we said that we told the board future raises were going to be difficult or maybe impossible. It was a $6 million deficit. This year, the state hasn't affected, the revenue from the state hasn't been affected. We're getting more money, even for the students that are not attending in person, we're receiving more money. We have been having savings in transportation, we having savings in travel. We got some money from the windmills, money that wasn't expected. We're thinking maybe our deficit is gonna go down maybe all the way to $2.5–3 million from the 6 million. So with these savings, we're gonna save. There are $4 million of employees that are leaving. We're gonna save $4 million. Of course, if we replace all of them, there's gonna be a savings of $1.2 million. If we replace all the employees, so next year's deficit, we're gonna save another million, 1.2, maybe $2 million. So for next year, based on the current numbers, it looks, if we approve this incentive, we're gonna have more money available for next year's. Well, actually, we're gonna have a deficit, but not a $6 million deficit. It's gonna be maybe a $2-3 million deficit. Less the, if approved, it's gonna go down maybe to 1.5. So we might consider giving raises. The board might consider giving raises next year. So we're gonna be in a better position than last year.
That's guaranteed.
No, we're still waiting for the state this month to see what's gonna happen with the state funding next year. Maybe by the end of the month, we'll have better numbers.
Okay, you just said it right now, Mr. Solis. By the end of the month, we'll have better numbers. Not right now. Right now, we don't.
Right
know.
now, we have, this year, the revenues are better than what we had expected. The state didn't cut any expenses, any revenues. We've been spending less money. Right now, it looks better than last year.
But we all know, Mr. Lanis, that we're spending less money because we're not.
There's no
We're right. We're not in the classrooms,
Yes, correct.
so we're saving money.
Yes.
Yeah, we're the pool's not being turned on maybe as much as it is. The lights are not being turned on as much as it is. The AC is not being turned on as much as it is because we don't have kids there. So that's what I'm saying. So how are we? See, Mr. Lanis, what I'm getting at is, you know what? Que bueno that these people are going to retire and that they're going to get their incentive. And let's be honest, my sister was one of the last ones to apply for it, and I'm pretty much arguing against for her getting it. Because what I'm looking out for, Mr. Lanis, is the people that are going to stay. That's what I'm looking out for. So,
If approved, we're gonna be in a better position than if it's not approved. If it's not approved, we're not gonna have those $1 million, $2 million in savings. So that we would increase the deficit next year by that amount. And of course, if we save $1 million, $2 million, it's gonna be every year from now on.
not if we hire.
If we replace the 78 employees, we're gonna save about $1.2 million.
From 78, we replaced 50.
If we replace 50 of the 78, we can save over $2 million.
Over $2 million,
Yes.
guaranteed.
Yes.
Mr. Lanis, can I ask a question on this, Mr. President? Can I ask a question? May I ask a question?
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Mr. Lanis, even though we were running a $6 million deficit from the year before, previous years, what is our general fund balance at this time?
Right now, it's $28 million.
Would you say that's a healthy fund balance?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that's why if we're healthy, and I guess that's what it gets down to, if we're healthy, why is it that we can't give something more to our employees, the ones that are staying, the ones that are staying? Yeah, because when I asked during the meeting, and I don't know, I think we had already come out of the workshop, I asked, after the motion was made, I asked, is there anything extra to give to the employees? And I was kind of laughed at. I think it's on recording somewhere there. I was kind of laughed at because según que no había dinero.
Yeah,
Ahora-
and that's correct. We still have a deficit. We have a deficit, and we're gonna do our best to recommend a raise because we still have a deficit, but we are in a better position than last year. So we don't have extra money. It's still a deficit.
But why is it that when I asked if there was extra money, I was told specifically that there wasn't? And
Because
now there's
there is not,
700,000
right now, we don't have extra money. If we invest this $1 million in incentives, we're gonna get it back.
But we have a healthy fund balance.
Yes, but we're still running a deficit. But the deficit is gonna be reduced. If we invest this $1 million, we're gonna reduce the deficit for next year.
But depending on how many we hire, and then not if raises are given left and right.
But the
Okay.
board, there's the one that you all approved the raises,
I didn't. What raise?
last year's raises.
Oh, those I approved, but if we're giving individual raises, so how is that gonna fix? I'm getting calls, and I'm getting calls of people saying, why are certain people getting raises?
Okay. I think we need to stick to what's on the agenda. That's a good question, sir, but it's a good question for another meeting. Mrs.
Mr.
Alvarez,
Perez, I'm sorry, but that's why the agenda item reads discussion, and at the very end, it says, and matters related thereto. And this was told by Mr. Cruz.
well, I don't know about raises to to employees at this time.
Well, that's why I've requested the salaries. I
Okay,
requested the salaries and they haven't been given.
all right, that is being worked on. I want to specifically allow Mrs. Alvarez now, who's got my attention, to ask some questions. Go ahead, Mrs. Alvarez.
Thank you, sir. First of all, again, thank you, everybody. And again, thank you for Mr. Moreno to have called this meeting, this called meeting. And I believe Mrs. Cruz also did. I've got a few questions, starting with the letter I received from Mr. Guzman that was not dated, but I received it on the 29th of April. And it reads that there was a committee meeting the day before, which I'm assuming was the 28th of April. This says that they met with Mr. Pedro Alanis, Alfonso Perez, and Luis Garza, the administration's committee. Yet it is Mr. Alanis's recommendation to approve this incentive. I'd like to see if Mr. Perez, Alfonso Perez, and Luis Garza are in the house to confirm that this is their recommendation as well.
Mr. Alfonso Perez and Mr. Luis Garza are present, ma'am. They're going to be the podium.
On the, excuse me. For me to recommend this is, for me, it's unethical because I am part of this list, part of this, I'm one of the persons who's going to be taking this incentive if approved. So for me, it would not be, I don't think it would be proper.
Yes, conflict of interest.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So,
Okay, Mr. Garza.
Good afternoon. When we had that meeting, it was a lengthy meeting, and Mr. Alanis presented his numbers, and Mr. Guzman asked me personally if I agree with the recommendation of Mr. Alanis. And I stated, yes, I do agree based on the numbers that he presented with two conditions. And I made it very clear. I will approve this, I will endorse this with two conditions. And I can go in public right now and I can mention to you the two conditions that I placed, that I told the superintendent. I will endorse it with two conditions. If you want for me to mention those two conditions, I'll be happy to do that.
Yes, sir, please.
First condition was that we will not, I hope you stick with the recommendation of Mr. Alanis and not hiring every single individual that is leaving. Meaning that if 78 individuals are leaving, we need to cut down on the number of individuals that are going to be recommended. That was my first condition, or recommendation, if you want to call it a recommendation. Do not hire all 78. And the other one that I made it very clear, and I have made this public previously, and I mentioned this to Mr. Guzman also in that meeting, that if an individual is leaving, and that individual is leaving with a salary, and I'm going to give you an example, of 100,000, and you're going to replace that particular individual, do not hire that individual with the same salary. I don't think it's fair for that individual that has, let's say, leaving the district after 38 years of experience, and you bring in someone that is, let's say, with fewer years of experience, and you're going to give them the same salary. That was my recommendation. And I made it very clear to him, I will endorse it with those two conditions.
Mr. Garza, and I appreciate your recommendation, but I believe that this is an issue that our school superintendent of schools and principals would need to come together and compromise or agree in what positions are needed to be replaced. Not added, but especially replaced. Now, we've had two incentives in the previous years.
Yes, sir.
There's never been a cap of numbers as far as how many employees we allowed them. Never been a cap in monetary value. We never requested this recommendations, or these recommendations were not made then as far as how many to replace or to add or to the list. Well, like I said, I appreciate your feelings on this, but this is something that this goes strictly to the duties of the school superintendent of schools and the principals. We can't come up right here and say, come up with a number and say, hey, let's only replace 20 or 5 or none, because this has to be Mr. Guzman's recommendation.
Totally agree with you, Mr. Scott.
And let me
Totally
ask
agree
you,
with
Mr. Garza, a question. Hasn't that our conversation been since day one?
That is correct. That is correct. The goal has been that if, let's say 80 individuals are going to leave, the goal has been that, again, the goal of the administration, including the superintendent, of course, is to not replace all 78. That has been the goal. That is correct.
And I'm
That's
sorry to
understood.
interject, that kind of contradicts because there was a plan 6 months ago to not replace certain people and they got replaced.
And that's why
So
I
what's
guess
the guarantee?
that's why Coach Escobar hits it right in the nail. That's why the superintendent of schools, I can make as many commitments as I can, or you want me to right now, as far as numbers. But the reality is this, there's a school district to run. And I remember back then when we didn't have positions in central office and I said, we're not gonna bring anybody in, and we brought several in. And I'm not talking about recently. But the intention here is clear. I agree with every single one of you. I want raises for everybody. I want to be in a position to recommend to the board raises for next year. I've discussed that with Mr. Garza, with Mr. Perez, and with Mr. Alanis. And the only way we're gonna be able to do that is that we don't go 1 per 1. And that's not gonna be the intention, I can assure you that. Now that if I say 7 teachers and I end up, doing 1 more or 1 less, I really don't know. It's gonna be based on, but I can assure you that those that are not teaching positions, I'm gonna wait as much as I can, even if I have to replace them, even if I can wait half a year, if I can wait a full year. But to be able to, for me to be held to a number, specific number, I think it's very, it's unfair. It's unfair because we have a district to run, but I can give you my word that Mr. Garza and I have had this conversation. I've had it with Mr. Guzman, I've had it with principals, and you can ask anyone right now that the directive that I've given is, it's not just the number that was there as a guess or an estimate. If I can do a lot more than that, I want the district to be in a very good financial position. Like I'm very conservative as far as when it comes to the numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Guzman.
And I want to specify that I didn't approve or I did not endorse this particular recommendation of Mr. Lanis, specifying that these are the numbers that we are gonna, stick with. I said hire fewer individuals that are leaving. So if 78 are leaving, we need to, recommend as a superintendent fewer individuals in areas, as Mr. Escobar stated, in areas that hopefully within a year or 2 we can be able to handle it. Again, because I care about the future of the district, and we care about the individuals that are staying behind. And that was the reason that I endorsed that particular recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Garza. Mrs. Alvarez, any more questions?
Yes, I do have more questions. Going back to the same little package that Mr. Guzman sent with that letter, is attached, I guess, some little charts or Excel sheets with some numbers on there, and I will direct myself to Mr. Lanis again, Pedro Alanis.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Alanis, you just mentioned windmills monies. When did those come in and how much?
Excuse me?
You mentioned when Mr. Moreno was asking questions, you mentioned that we had received windmill money. When was that and how much?
We received $1.7 million. I believe it was in February of this year.
3 months ago?
January.
3 months ago?
Yes. But that money was to supplement revenue that we're gonna lose in state funding. And then they gave us about $700,000, I believe in about the same months in January.
Okay, but $1 million of those were to supplement things that have already been spent.
Well, actually, the $1.7 million, our state revenue is gonna be decreased by that amount, and we received it from the windmills, plus $700,000 more.
Okay, so now you're saying the state is going to reduce us?
Yes.
A few minutes ago, you
that's
said
the
we were
windmill
not.
agreement, the windmill agreement, that's how it works. The first year, they reduce, but they give us the money, and then the second year, it's the M&O taxes. They're taxed the first year, so it affects our funding.
So it's a wash.
Yes, those 1.7 million is a wash.
So it's not something we can use on anything else?
Excuse me?
It's not something we can use for anything else because it's just a wash.
Yes. But the
So we cannot
700,000,
make plans.
the
Mhm.
$700,000, that's for the district. That's a contract we have with the windmills.
Okay, okay. Now you were also, when Mr. Moreno was asking you questions, you kept saying maybe we'll be in a better position, maybe this, maybe that. What are the guarantees or what is the maybe? How can we be for sure that we will be in a better position? And that all these numbers that we received in here, the savings and all that, and I know you don't work for the state, you wouldn't know how this is going to affect our first rating. But do you foresee us being affected, that rating being affected with this expenditure?
The rating in the past year, we lost 10 points because of the deficit.
Mhm.
Automatically, with the deficit, we lose 10 points. So any point, in addition to the 10 points we lose, we go down from superior rating to the above standard.
Right.
This past year, it was a $6 million deficit. It's gonna still be a deficit, so we're gonna lose those 10 points. And then other ratios that might be affected, the administrative cost ratio, that's one of the ratios we pay close attention to. Because if we lose any other indicator, automatically we're gonna lose another point.
Mr.
When?
Lenz, going back to that, you said that we were already in a deficit, then, and we had it, and we got it. So now why are we not gonna get it? The rating.
We're gonna lose 10 points for next
We
year.
were already at a deficit.
Yes,
Okay, and we lost those 10 points, and we
Yes.
still made the rating.
yes, but there's a lot of factors that go into place. Submitting the audit on time, there's no material non-compliance, a lot of student factors. If we lose students, there's a lot of factors.
Which is fine, but not because of the deficit.
The deficit, we lose 10 points. From the 100, we start at a 90. So if we get an 89, we're gonna lose the superior rating.
So right now we have a 90, I believe, correct?
Yes.
Right. So are you saying that from that 90, you believe we're gonna lose another 10?
It depends on the student ratio, and there's a lot of formulas that might affect us, that we cannot control. The students, if they don't come in person, it might affect the district.
Okay,
So
okay.
any indicator we can lose, come down, because at one point we might go down. But
Now, the first rating, that also affects our revenues, right? Our income from the state?
no, it doesn't.
It does
affect
not at all?
Not at all.
Not at all.
It's like a
Okay.
report card.
Right, okay. Okay, then on the, I think I have one more question. Hold on. On the original motion that was done on March the 25th, I believe. Yeah, March the 25th. The motion there was to adopt resolution of early notification of employee separation from employee incentive to eligible district employees for the 2020-2021 school year and 21-22 school year. Okay, that's how it originally read back in March 21st. Okay, now the resolution, of course, was, or what we discussed, if I remember correctly, during the workshop was, like Mr. Moreno mentioned, 500,000, 40 employees. If there was more, maybe 530, 540, 540, 540,000 in to pay out. We're looking, like Mr. Moreno says, 1.2 above $1.2 million, if I believe. I think it's a little over $1.2 million that we'll be paying out. When and where was that approved?
Well, actually, in the meeting, it is my understanding that the number of employees was capped at 40
Mhm.
or more, depending on the district administration discretion, and there was no cap. The cap, the $500,000 was removed
It was removed from where?
From where, sir?
from in the action item.
It always stated based on the allocated funds.
And based on what we discussed.
Right.
And what we
The
discussed.
allocated funds that was discussed within the budget was within the workshop was 500, maybe, if I remember
548.
correctly, somebody had mentioned if the last minute an administrator comes in, we might exceed maybe 540, 560, if I remember correctly, were the numbers. I don't ever remember, correct me if I'm wrong, if we ever mentioned anything over $1 million or close to $1 million.
If I may, let me interject here. I know there was a lot of discussion at the workshop and at the meeting itself where it discussed dollar amounts, individual amounts, but like you all just stated, that's discussion. I know that we seek legal counsel on a recommendation because I went back and forth also. And even discussing it with individuals at the administration, the actual motion, when you go back and the lawyer, our attorney went back and looked at it, kind of gave us a lot of discretion, because the motion made by Coach Escobar, Coach Escobar, I'm sorry, gave us a lot of discretion. So upon the recommendation, based on that discretion, upon the recommendation of Mr. Alanis, I felt that in the best interest of the district, it was to actually get them all in. But I never got confirmation from the attorney that we had that discretion. So then I reversed my decision, went back down to 40. After that, I got confirmation from the attorney, our legal counsel, upon reviewing the actual motion itself. And he said that based on the actual motion and that we had all that discretion. And I understand Mr. Moreno, has discussed that with me as far as, that he feels that as a superintendent, I should not have the authority, or that's too much money. And so I respect his thought process, but my thought process really at the very beginning was that I did have that discretion. But until I got confirmation from the attorney, that's the reason we got to that point.
Okay, and the attorney is not present, correct?
Correct.
He is not, okay. Then I have, if I may, Mr. Moreno, I want to add to that. If Mr. Escobar then made a motion, which was not the agenda item, can we at any time on the fly add to the agenda items?
He actually said that the agenda, he recommended approving the agenda item with the discretion to the administration to allow to go over if necessary, if we felt.
Okay, and that's what I'm saying, that at any time that we make a motion, we can add or delete or make changes and anything
Yes,
to it on the fly.
that is correct.
At any
Yes.
time.
At any time, the motion that's going to be placed on the floor, supersedes anything. You're not restricted to the item in its entirety. We've done that many times where, of course, this is like Mr. Moreno said, this is a lot of money. I understand and I respect that thought process. But to answer your question, yes, it can
Okay,
be modified.
Mr. Guzman, because you're referring to the attorney only told me was based on that last little sentence there, just based on that. Determines it permissible based on the allocated budget of the incentive program. So then why is that there? Why it says determine?
what was the allocated program, the allocated budget?
500,000, the allocated budget, or it was 1.2? The allocated budget at the beginning. The amount that we were
500 and
discussing.
some thousand, no?
I recall there were different options and each option had a different amount. And they also had different amount of employees. And those options, and I remember in that meeting, that I did ask Mr. Alanis if we were thinking of doing $500,000, the proposed budget was $500,000 this year and $500,000 next year, that if that were the case, that I would prefer to commit to 1 year and combine both so that we could give to everybody.
I remember that. In fact, I remember Mr. Alanis trying to interject several times that the more individuals in it, the more the savings. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Alanis. I would hear you say that over and over again.
He did say that several times.
I do remember that loud and clear. And when his presentation, one of the questions I asked, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Raza, but I asked, what happens if we don't accept anybody? He goes, and I was talking about maybe recommending a raise for next year. He goes, it's not going to happen because we're in a deficit. If we include numbers, then we're going to reduce the deficit. If we include everybody, then that would mean more savings exponentially, like Mr. Gata says. We have to make sure that we don't replace one per one, and that is not the intention here. That is not the intention. That will not happen. So is it in the best interest of the district so that we can come in and present to the board, like Mr. Moreno says, what are we gonna do for our staff that stays? Definitely, based on my understanding from Mr. Perez, I'm sorry, Mr. Alanis, and Mr. Perez was there, and Mr. Garza was there. That was the gist of my worry. Are we gonna be able to help out those individuals that stay? Is this really something worth, and what's better, none, halfway through, or all?
And that's my question right now. That's why I asked, and nobody answers. Are we gonna give a raise to our employees next year?
If we do our job well, Mr. Moreno, if we do our job well, and I think that he can answer that. If we don't replace one per one and we really do our homework, I would think that that was the whole idea, that will be a manageable deficit now, that we'll have a deficit, but not 6 million. And we've been in this situation before where it's a manageable deficit, and we've used that term before. If it's a manageable deficit, then, and I've even asked Mr. Alanis, give me a number. He goes, well, 2 million, 2.5 million, 3, that's manageable. 5, 6, it's not manageable. So based on that recommendation, that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, if I may, Mr. Perez,
Go ahead.
I have a few other questions. Going back to the little package where it says the count of the people, it's I guess, page number 2 or 3 if you count the cover sheet. It says count the people that are filing or applied for the incentive were 78, and the recommended, I guess the ones or someone's recommending for 58 to be hired or replaced. There's a difference of 20 there. We're looking at the ones to be replaced are of course in all different areas, but my main concerns here are, for example, counselors. We have 2 leaving, if of course, I'm sure it's going to be approved, 2 leaving and only replacing 1. What's going to happen with that campus that is going to stay without a counselor?
Well, let me explain. There's a rhyme and reason for everything. I know that I've already talked. I don't want to mention specifics because nothing's for sure, but I already talked to the principal of that campus, and I've already looked at how that's going to be covered. And let's say again, it might be half a year, it might be the full year, it might be indefinitely, but it's being covered. I'll be more than happy to discuss, these personnel matters, with you, and you'll understand my rhyme and reason how we're going to get there as far as that one. But again, I don't want to commit to just these because those were his projections. But based on his projections, I can see that happening easily. That specific one where we get one replacement, a counselor replacement, and the other one we can hold the fort, possibly minimum half a year through December.
I'm assuming, and I may be wrong, the facilitator and the lab proctor would probably be the same campus, and that's fine. Okay, but then we go to administrators, directors, and supervisors. We have 8 wanting to leave and replacing only 4. What's with the jobs of those other 4 that will not be replaced?
Okay, I'll give you an example. Right now in central office, I'm losing 3. Mr. Perez, Mrs. Sarabia, and Mrs. Cadena. My intentions, again, half a year, a full year, maybe a little longer, is 1 recommendation for those positions where I will pick up some of the responsibilities, other individuals that I've already, there's a plan in place. And Mr. Garza, you've heard this plan over and over before. Mr. Perez has been part of the conversation. There is no ill intent to try to replace a 1 per 1. There's no magic formula. I may have to, do one thing and then, because it's happened before, but I really see this working. It's very doable.
Okay.
Mr. Alanis and Mr. Guzman.
Just a moment. Mrs. Alvarez, are you finished with your questions?
Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Escobar, go
My
ahead.
question is, that was just a scenario, right?
Yes.
We were not locking in into any specific numbers. That would be impossible without having first to study the situation and then come up with numbers. So I took it as a scenario, as an example. It could be 48, it could be 28, it could be 68. But this is, right now is not the time. I think we need to give these people a chance to evaluate this, study this, and then start coming up with a number. Again, if I may, I was the one that made the motion, and I recommended resolution number 2. and it entailed the numbers of 40 and a half a million. And that was the starting base. For me, that's the way I interpret it. But then part B of that motion was to give the superintendent and administration flexibility to add, to increase if there was more employees. We had no ideas how many employees were gonna end up. We had no idea how many were interested in taking the buyout. So we didn't specify any numbers. If we would have, at that meeting, we would have stipulated, Mr. Guzman, add on, say 10 or 200,000 more. We didn't. We had a chance, we discussed it, we had it before we voted, and that was not brought up. So when we gave you discretion and flexibility, we didn't stipulate any numbers. So that's why I would take it that once you studied, before you made a recommendation, you and the administration came with the conclusion that you could recommend the 77 or 78, whatever it was. Was that the case? This is what you alluded to when you got together with the team. So I would take it that you would make a recommendation without studying the numbers.
That is correct.
And I guess that goes back to one of my questions then, Mr. Escobar, when you made the recommendation or the motion, you're fine with them going over 700,000? You're fine with us not approving 700,000 because we get into discussion about 30,000, about 5,000, about 15,000, but 700,000 discretion is just, you're fine with that. That's what I'm asking.
Let me tell you, Mr. Moreno, that's why when Mr. Guzman took the time, the day, whatever that day was, to get together with his team, administrators there, and come up with a decision, they took into consideration how much we could. So it's their recommendation that we could take the 78 or the 1.2 million. It's not me or us to question if that's what the recommendation is, if they can justify it and be accountable for it, and that's what they're telling us.
Then why did we have the workshop?
Well, to entertain ideas, thoughts, discussions, that was part of it, and that's what we did. And you, Mr. Moreno, and myself, and Mr. Perez, and Mr. Guzman got a response or a clarity or an opinion from the attorney. And this is what it says, if I might read it. It says, although there was a discussion about a monetary threshold of 500,000, the below link to the district board meeting does not evident that the board adopted the attached resolution with specific monetary cap. The motion passed by the school board at video link 38.37 specifically granted the authority to the administration to approve more than 30 without restrictions, namely a monetary cap. And this is from the
attorney,
school attorney.
You sent it to me. That's what I'm saying. You're fine with them with not approving the 700,000. You're fine with them spending the 700,000. If it didn't just, in other words, it didn't tell, then why did we have the workshop and why were we discussing 500,000?
Because we left it to the discretion, Mr. Moreno. You speak about not being micromanaging. Well, this is something that they have to do. This is their job. That's the responsibility that they're giving. And you're not the only one that wants to give teachers a raise. That's on all our minds.
Then why haven't we discussed it?
Okay.
Why haven't we discussed it? If we want to give it, it's real easy to call a meeting because me and Ms. Cruz called this meeting. So if we want to call a meeting to give our employees, the rest of employees that are going to stay, give a raise, why haven't we called that meeting?
That is something that is going to be considered. And we'll wait for that recommendation from the central office. And we'll take it up at a future meeting when the time calls for it.
Mr. Perez, but if we want transparency, why are we not voting on $700,000 extra?
It's all semantics, Mr. Moreno. And so by that, I mean.
No,
that,
I know, sir, but
okay.
why does it all come down to that?
Because we gave the central office staff, the superintendent,
That's
discretion.
That's what I am asking right now. That's what I asked Mr. Squares. That's all I'm asking is by giving that motion, did you know that you're giving in that discretion for 700,000? That's all I'm asking.
Yes, sir. Yes, it was.
So you're giving
And
700,000.
I wanted.
Okay, all right. I think we've made it clear. Now, Mrs. Cruz.
Tell me if I'm wrong, because I kept on going to the video of the meeting of March 25th, even an hour ago at the house, because I said, maybe I'm wrong. And
Because
know
I
that-
sent the link to Ms. Cruz, because I don't know why it was only sent to me, Mr. Perez, Mr. Escobar, and Guzman. So I think that we should all get the same stuff, so I sent it to Ms. Cruz.
And I went back to the video and it says that it was mentioned that if not, excuse me, that if not, we didn't have enough funds, we had enough funds and not so many teachers applied, then the committee it was left up to them, to the discretion to go higher than 40 people.
Yes.
That's what I saw on the video, based on the allocated budget. I went back again, and it says that, based on the allocated budget.
And you all told us that the allocated budget was 500,000. Am I not right? That's all I'm saying. Am I
Okay.
not right? Are we not?
What I interpreted that day, and again, maybe it's a matter of interpretation.
And that's what it is, because.
Okay, maybe
an
it's a matter of
attorney can
interpretation,
interpret it either
But
way.
when there's a matter of interpretation, then we go to legal counsel. Because I went back and forth.
Right.
You saw my.
Mr. Guzman.
Monday. Mhm.
Mr. Guzman, ese meeting that when Mr. Escobar made that motion, other than what is stated on the agenda, you all, because I haven't gone back to see it, you all got and forwarded the information to Mr. Cruz based on the video recording. What do the minutes state? Are those minutes even printed yet? Because if
Are the
I
minutes printed
remember
yet?
correctly, we don't even have to be, I don't think we even need to be recording our meetings, if I'm not mistaken.
Did we, have you worked on the minutes, ma'am? Yes? What did the minutes state? She can go get them, which is, again, I guess she can go get them right now. But the bottom line is, when I was there at the meeting, my interpretation of the board's motion made by Mr. Escobar was that we had the discretion. There was no mention of anything that was discussed, and what discussed was a lot of different options. So as superintendent of schools, I bring Mr. Alanis, I have two other trusted administrators there, and this information's presented, then in good faith, I felt, you know what, all of them, it makes sense. It's gonna save us, more money, put us in a better position or in a great position to be able to offer a raise to those that are going to stay. Then I went back and forth with the attorney, questioning and worried myself.
Okay, and I will close with this. This will be it, and I hate doing this, Mr. Guzman, and I'm sure you're not gonna appreciate it, but I just have to do it. If it was up to your discretion, as you read and saw, and they were told in the meeting of March the 25th, why last Wednesday, the 27th, why did you decide not to go with all 78 if you were so for sure that you could do it?
Because I wanted legal counsel to tell me and direct me. And it took me a while for the legal counsel to clarify.
But it was
my
crystal
decision.
clear. But it was crystal clear, like you said, that they had given you authority.
Mhm. But I was being questioned by a board member, and out of respect to that board member, it is my obligation to listen to him. And at that point, I said, you know what? If he feels this strong about it, I'll go with 40. Because I had asked legal counsel to give me a recommendation, and to that point, he had not given me a recommendation. And so my decision at that point, I said, if legal counsel does not give me a recommendation, and I went over with Mr. Perez and Mr. Garza. Mr. Perez knew what I was going to do, what I did, and it was because I couldn't get a direct answer from legal counsel. It was taking too long, in my opinion, and I needed to, either stick to my guns or change it. So I said, legal counsel, give me a recommendation. I never got the recommendation. I went ahead and went back. Then legal counsel, after the fact, gave me legal recommendation, and I went with his legal recommendation at that point. That's to answer my question with all due respect, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Guzman.
Thank you.
Guzman, and you just said right now, it's based on interpretation, because when I talked to legal counsel, his immediate answer to me was, you know what, let me call. That was the only, because if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not, Ms. Hart was there present.
Yes.
So the only amount that was discussed was 500,000. And here it says that. That's when I talked to legal counsel. He said, you know what, it needs to be put back on the agenda. And then all of a sudden, I get policies and stuff like that, and then saying that it can because of interpretation, sir. But you could argue it either way. You could
Well,
argue it for,
again,
you
in
could argue it for
interpretation, what
against.
I have to base myself is what
The
I heard.
attorney, sir, the attorney.
Exactly. Oh, the attorney, again, I don't
That's
speak,
what I'm
I can't
saying,
speak for
sir.
himself. I
You
can't
could
speak for
argue it
him.
either way.
Yeah, I can't speak for him.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I understand.
Any other questions?
No, but I want to add something to
Go
that.
ahead.
When we were in that meeting, I do recall, also, like I said, I do agree with, you know, the $500,000, the 40, we were actually going 30 employees and 40 employees and back and forth with all that. I recall I said, well, we can approve this now and we can always go back and amend. And somebody said, no, this is it. Whatever if we are giving the authority to the administrators, they will have the final say so of what's gonna happen. And I said, okay, but I did ask, you know, I always said we can always amend. Now, if you want to vote on extending the monetary, well, we can go ahead and do that today. Pero pues, you know, the back and forth but we did, you know, that was answered to me in the meeting. It should be in the recording. You all are talking about a recording. It should be in the recording when somebody answered. We're gonna vote and we're gonna give the discretion to the administration.
Mr. Guzman, Mr. Perez, if again, and I'll say it, and again, I guess for the record, we questioned $5, we questioned $10, we questioned $30, we questioned raises, and we're gonna be giving the authority, and don't get me wrong, central office, but giving you guys the authority to go over 700,000, then pa qué queremos policy? So what do we want policy for? And what do we want meetings and what do we want workshops for?
And what was the purpose of resolution 2, the part B, where we gave you flexibility and discretion? That took care of that.
You gave him, Mr. Escobar, and ahí están todos, you gave him flexibility, sir, because what they discussed was a couple over, y si se pasaban unos cuantos, and somebody gave the perfect example. If an administrator, which they did, if an administrator comes at the end, y de repente se pasan 20, 30, 40,000, that was discussed. That was discussed. Never, ever,
700,000.
ever did we discuss 80 employees, because that number was not even in the picture, porque acuérdate, Pedro, Mr. Alanis, that you said, number, based on the numbers of our last two incentives, that number, that's más o menos where we're at. Why is it that so many people want to leave Roma ISD? All of a sudden.
Maybe
Because of the
focus, Mr.
incentive?
Moreno. It's
No,
very
no,
uncertain.
no.
Okay, all right, now let's bring order back into the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Moreno. Anybody else have a comment?
The
Go ahead, Ms. Cruz, go ahead.
the agenda says, the item here on the agenda says adopt a district ESNI program with a specific monetary amount.
Okay,
Okay.
that is passed. Okay, we'll take the question to that in just a moment. Any other comments? Mrs. Alvarez, you wanted to add?
No, all I want to say is I wish the finance department well. I'll be the first one to congratulate them, even if we don't meet the ratings that we've always had and kept. And I am sure looking forward to see that deficit lowered.
Thank you, Mrs. Alvarez.
And I guess just one last question before, Mr. Alanis, again, the money that we discussed here, and I'll go back to the recording and I'll look for the minutes, because now we're going to minutes and seconds and stuff like that. I specifically asked if there was going to be money to give to the employees as a raise, as a stipend, as something to the people that were going to stay. And I was specifically told que no había nada. And now all of a sudden there's 700,000 to give to these people that are going to leave. What can you guarantee me right now for the people that are going to stay? Better than a 3% raise, because the 3% raise was peanuts.
The 700,000.
Better than a 3% raise.
The first 40 employees cost 558,000, and we're gonna save 935,000 on those employees. Then the additional 38 employees, that the incentive cost is gonna be 686,000, and we're gonna save on those 38 employees 1,174,000. So it's a lot of savings. If we accept those extra 38 employees, we're gonna save over $1 million on just those 38 employees.
On the last two incentives that we've had, what are the savings? On
The
the
first
last
one,
two incentives that we've
the
had.
first incentive, it was in 2015, I believe, and there were 65 employees. 65 employees that left the first year, and the cost was a little over $1 million. But we saved a lot of money. And then we did it again in 2016, and we had 34 employees that left. And And because we had a deficit at those times, and this helps the district.
Okay, and I guess for future, I'm not sure if it's related to this one or not, Mr. Perez, Ricky Perez. But I know Mr. Alanis doesn't have those exact numbers, but if there was a cost savings, I don't understand how our deficit kept growing. So I don't know if Mr. Perez, you can, Mr. Alanis, if you could get us that information from the previous, incentives, the previous incentives. If it was such a cost savings, why are we in a $6 million deficit?
And again, Mike, that's Ms. Alvarez's question, Mr. Lanis, again, as now, I guess, because I see that things are being directed to you as being in charge. Can we guarantee our employees a raise, a hefty raise? Because again, the raise that we gave last time was very little. So can we guarantee them a heftier raise and that their insurance stays the same and that we're fine with it? Because again, word out there, sir, and because I've gotten calls, is that people are getting raises. So I guess, can they just come to central office and ask for raises?
Or we can on the fly next time, just throw it in there.
We're gonna be in a better position. If this is accepted, it's gonna free up about $2 million at least in the fund balance. But we still have a deficit. So we're gonna work on the numbers and maybe in the summer, we're gonna present a budget for next year. And hopefully then, let's see how it looks. But it's gonna look better than last year.
And then I don't want to, I guess, bring Mr. Garza into this, but based on these resolutions, not resolutions, these, I guess these conditions that he had, what's the guarantee on these conditions? Are we not even going to pay attention to them? Are we not, he just mentioned them, but nobody said anything.
As far as being.
As not hiring every single individual,
Okay, so-
and then the salary cap.
Yes, sir. I believe that the superintendent alluded to that, as well as Mr. Garza, that we are going to be taking a conservative route with that. Am I correct, Mr. Guzman?
Yes, that is correct.
And there's going to be a salary cap?
A salary cap, meaning?
Well, for individuals that are coming in other words, if somebody's at
Well-
100,000, you're coming in at, right now you're at 55,000. And because that position is earning 100,000, that person worked up to it.
Yeah, I understand. Just like that person came up, they will be prorated. I know that I used to check with the business manager. There's a study. It's very,
The
that
days.
I'm sorry?
Is that the one where the days, if you're a teacher and you get moved to whatever it is and you get 40 extra days, aren't you supposed to be getting those days? You're supposed to be getting paid your days, right?
That's correct.
That's it.
As a teacher, that's correct. Well, if they have a coaching stipend or if they have stuff, UIL, that would increase their salary, right? But I don't know what the question is, Mr. Moreno, exactly.
That if.
What I can assure you is this, Mr. Moreno, that if there's a central office position and that person had, 30 years experience, but I'll give you this as an example. If there's a central office position and this person has 30 years experience and we get somebody with 20 years experience, they're not going to be earning the same thing. I mean, Mr. Perez and I sat down many times and looked at that. Now, if there's going to be a transfer because Mr. Perez took the incentive. So I will have to look into a recommendation based on a lot of data. And yeah, it will not be that amount.
And they could be rumors, Mr. Guzman, but I'd hate that if people are getting raises just because they came and asked for them or somebody came to ask for them, sir. And that's why, and that's what I'm saying, sir. These people need to understand, sir, that they're being looked out for because I've gotten a lot of calls, sir, and I know that we think that morale is up there, sir. To me, I've seen it. So my question is this. I've asked for these salaries because that's what I want to see, sir. And those people, I think, deserve the same attention and the same deserving raise that anybody else has gotten. I guess, and I'll say it again, just for coming to ask for it.
For the last 7 years as a superintendent, I've had many individuals that come and question their salary. And every single time I run it by, at that time, Mr. Perez, and ask him, look into this. And if he comes in good faith, and I trust him 100%, And he says, yeah, this is the rationale. I think they just, and many times people come in and ask, they don't get it because they ask. If they end up getting a raise, it's because they deserve that raise.
But the raises
Mr.
shouldn't
Pettis,
be done.
isn't that the process we
You just
have
said it
all the time?
deserves, Sir, but I think all of our district deserves a
Yeah,
raise.
Oh, yeah.
All of our district deserves a
Whenever,
raise.
whenever somebody came to complain about salary, that there was an adjustment usually. You don't necessarily call it a raise because for some reason.
Thank you for clarifying.
Something there. So it's an adjustment. And.
Mr. Gus-
It just depends. It just depends on what.
Just a moment. Okay.
Mr. Guzman, but raises or changes of salary should not occur if their contract has already been executed, no?
Mr. Pettis, how does that work? That if their contract was already executed, raises, we wait till the end of the year, or how does that work?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so they shouldn't be done
All
throughout the
year.
year.
Nothing can be given during the year.
If it's an
I've
adjustment,
had asked back in October 2016, 17.
adjustments, not raises, I'm sorry, it's my fault because I'm using the wrong
Well, you don't
term.
have to, and I was just gonna say that, so you don't have to call it raises if you don't want to call it raises. Can anybody come and ask for adjustments?
Anybody can come and ask for anything. It doesn't mean that they're gonna get it. And like I said, in my 7 years here, I'm gonna be honest, that a lot more people come in and request a review of their salary. A lot less get anything, or an adjustment, if you will, than do get the adjustment. And Mr. Pettis is extremely conservative. He will not sign something and give me something until he felt that it was really necessary.
Sir, and-
Mr. Guzman, so un adjustment se puede hacer a un contrato, although it's been executed?
Mr. Pettis, can an adjustment be made throughout the year, I guess what she's saying? Or through a contrato, through a contract,
It's only for additional duties.
and additional duties? Okay.
Salaries
Yes,
are
sir.
not mentioned on the contract.
Monday?
Salaries are not mentioned on the contract.
Salaries are not mentioned. So what's the question again, Ms. Alvarez? Read it
The
out.
question is, I'm not sure what kind of have an idea what Mr. Moreno is referring to, but my question is, if anybody, which of course they can walk in at any given time to ask for either an adjustment or a salary increase or a change in their income, I guess, if we can say it. I remember back in October 16, 17, that I requested salary adjustments for all professionals. And I was told that if a contract has already been executed, that nothing could be done. So that is my question. Can we at any time do any kind of salary changes, adjustments, or whatever we want to call them to our employees? And I'll leave it at that. That could be homework and we can get the answers later. Going back to the incentives, all of these 78 people that have applied and probably qualified for the incentive, are any of those eligible for rehiring here at Roma ISD?
The bus drivers?
Yes, two bus drivers.
2 bus drivers? I believe 2 bus drivers. That's what I've been told so far. Only, right?
Yes.
Yes, 2 bus drivers only.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other further questions? Okay, then it has been moved and seconded that the Roma Independent School District Board rescind board action of March 25th, 2021 in regards to the adoption of the district early resignation notice incentive program with a specific monetary amount based upon the district's budget and matters related thereto. If there are no further questions, all those in favor of this motion say aye or raise your right hand. 3 in favor. Those opposed say no and raise your right hand.
No.
4 opposed. The majority of the trustees are opposed. The motion does not pass. Agenda item number 4, employment and resignation of professionals and paraprofessionals. Mr. Guzman.
Yes, we have none.
Thank you, Mr. Guzman. Agenda item number 5, adjournment. Is there a motion on the floor?
I guess I'll make the motion to adjourn, but just before we adjourn, when can I get those salaries, sir?
Mr. Hartson, what's the status?
Because I think if I would have requested them to the outside, I would have gotten them quicker.
Okay. That, you'll be able to.
Mr. Hartson will get back to you.
Okay.
He's
There is
overseas.
a-
Then we can put something else back on the agenda.
Yes, I most definitely will.
All right, the motion is made by Mr. Moreno, seconded by,
I'll second that.
thank you, Mrs. Alvarez. All those in favor to adjourn, say aye, raise your right hand.
Aye.
All 7, 4, none opposed. The motion to adjourn is approved. It is now 6:04
Somebody-
PM. And this called meeting of the Roma Independent School District Board of Trustees is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and good night.